I have a very long question here, so I'm only going to read parts of it. Kim, I know higher levels of consciousness exist, as I was taken up once by some higher beings to a place where God grants any state you want to experience. It was phenomenal levels of peace, love, and joy, so far beyond that the words don't begin to describe what that was. There are no words for it. But I was not able to hold that higher state of awareness and fell very hard after a few years being back in a realm this dense. So then I'm going to skip because the question really is about when there are these higher levels of consciousness, how can we experience all the difficulties we experience on Earth? So also I see in the stories of Kuan Yin and many other masters that they supposedly went through innumerable horrific lifetimes of torment on this planet and or others. Why is that? It seems to be a requirement, and it seems as if your life energy must be given as a sacrifice in the worst possible ways to the monsters for untold lifetimes before you'll be allowed to escape this realm. That doesn't reflect a higher loving presence watching over all this, so I find all this very confusing. And then it goes later, it makes me suspect that the soul trap idea is real, as if even our love can be used to trick us into coming back here for more torture. Must one become sociopathic to get out of here, utterly stop caring? I also know numerous people who firmly said no after death, that they were not coming back, not willing to reincarnate again, yet they were forced back down here anyway, kicking, screaming, ranting, and fighting all the way. Anyway, thank you for sharing this material. I'm trying to find the truth, as apparently I have been for lifetimes, and escape this maze of nightmare. Perhaps you could point me to specific videos or pages. Well, first I would point to my video about how the world was created, because it gives you the overall view of the purpose of life, the purpose of an unnatural planet, and how we grow in consciousness. But what I will comment on here is this, that, because I see this in myself, I see it in many spiritual people, we came to Earth with the best of intentions. And yet we feel that we have been exposed to all these horrific things in many lifetimes. And we can't understand this. And as the questioner says, can our love, our willingness to take things on, can that be misused so it becomes a trap where we can't escape it? And then the question is, do you have to become a sociopath to get out of here? We don't care about other people's suffering. And I know this is a very big topic, and that's why if you feel this is important to you, please watch my playlist about avatar psychology, where I go into it more deeply than I can do it here. But what I'll do here is briefly describe the process I went through myself. Because I recognize this, we are very willing to take things on, we are very willing to give our love and our light to help other people. And in one sense, it's because we care. We love people, we love the Ascended Masters, we love life, we want to see progress happen on this planet. So we are willing to go into these difficult situations lifetime after lifetime. And it just, at times it can be overwhelming to us. We are just so bogged down by it, so overwhelmed by it that we almost can't bear it. It becomes unbearable. And two things well, let me say one thing first. What I realized at some point was that as an avatar who came from a natural planet, as a sensitive person, I was very much an empath when I was a child and when I was younger. I cannot psychologically survive on Earth. I mean, seriously. I cannot function psychologically on this planet because there's so much suffering, so much atrocity, so much unfairness going on. I can't live with it. I cannot psychologically live on this planet. And I have met many spiritual people who have the same reaction. Many are not really able to formulate it. I would have been able to formulate it just 5 years ago. But I've came to that realization. I can't actually live here. I can't psychologically function on this planet. But of course I'm here, I'm an embodiment, so I have to find a way to deal with it. So how do I deal with it? Well, the first thing I had to do, which of course is what all people do, you have to learn to ignore certain things. And the way I did this for myself was that I came to realize that, and I've talked about this in several videos, that the state of affairs on Earth is caused by the fact that most people have gone into this state of separation where they use their duality consciousness. And this is what creates conflicts between groups of people. I mean, the classical example is the Crusades, where the Christians fought the Muslims. And both of them thought they were killing those other people in the name of God, but it was the same God. And they felt justified in doing so. And I realized that all this was a result of people's free will choices. They had chosen to create these conflicts. They had chosen not to be willing to look at themselves and say, how do we need to change, instead of trying to force other people to change. I mean, it's a central mechanism on Earth, on an unnatural planet. People are trying to improve their physical life by forcing other people or forcing nature. And that's, of course, what creates conflict, because everybody's doing it. So they're constantly clashing. So I came to a point where I realized this is a result of people's choices, or lack of choices, lack of aware choices. But it's a result of their choices. And I looked at this and I said, okay, could I say anything that would make people change their minds? In other words, could I say anything to the Russian people right now that would make them rebel against Putin? Could I say anything to the people who elected Trump to make them rebel against him? Could I have said anything to the people who elected Hitler in a democratic election in 1933? And I realized, no, there's nothing I could say, because they wouldn't listen to me. And that's when I said to myself, okay, if people are suffering because of their own choices, and they are not willing to listen to me, why do I feel responsible for their suffering? Why do I feel that I should have empathy for their suffering? Why should I be disturbed by it? I mean, it's disturbing to me that there are women who are completely suppressed in Muslim nations. Can't have a driver's license, can't go to the store, can't have to cover themselves. It's disturbing to me. But do I have any influence in Muslim nations? Would they be willing to listen to anything I say? Can I see it's a result of the people's choices, both the men and the women? They are not willing to overthrow this society and say we want a more modern nation. So, should I really put my attention on this? And many other kinds of suffering. So in other words, the reason why I couldn't live on Earth psychologically is I felt a certain responsibility for people's suffering, and I felt obligated to at least have empathy with them. And when I realized they wouldn't listen to me, I said, okay, if people are making these choices that are causing their suffering, I don't have to put my attention on their suffering. And so, as the questioner was saying, do you have to become a sociopath to get out of here? And in a certain sense, we have to. And we have to become sociopathic to some degree to be able to live here. And most people are like that, you can see it. Most people have found some way to ignore a lot of the things that are going on the planet, because otherwise they couldn't live with it. And I just think, A sociopath is a person who has no empathy for others out of a lack of awareness. But for me, I felt it was actually a result of raising my awareness to really understanding free will and how it works itself out that allowed me to say, okay, I'm choosing not to put my attention on people suffering when there's nothing I could do about it. So this is one thing. But then the other thing, because the person asking the question, and I understand very well where the person is coming from, but the person asking the question is saying, can our love be misused so it becomes a trap we can't get out of here? And I would say no. But when you're talking about love, what is that? Because what most people on earth call love is actually possessive love. And possessive love means that you claim to love somebody, but you also are imposing upon them a certain image of how they should live. So, as an avatar, you can have this possessive love where you are feeling that people shouldn't be suffering on earth. And therefore, when you see them suffering, you are projecting that you want them to stop suffering. And you think this is love, but it's actually possessive love. And when I recognized this, I started looking at this deeper because I started realizing, again, based on these teachings that are given in my avatar videos and the books I mentioned there that the Ascended Masters gave, starting with Healing Your Spiritual Traumas, I started realizing that I came as an avatar. And I was exposed to what the Masters called the cosmic birth trauma, what is very traumatized of coming to Earth. But I also realized that I came to Earth with a certain not fully mature attitude. Because I came to Earth with a desire to change things. And what does that mean? I mean, honestly, you look at Earth, how do you change things? Well, you can only change things by changing other people, which really means changing their state of consciousness. But that really meant I wasn't respecting free will. I came with the attitude, there's no suffering on a natural planet. There's so much suffering on this unnatural planet on Earth, and there shouldn't be suffering on Earth. What right do I have to make that assumption? If people want to experience suffering, who am I to tell them they don't have a right to do it? Think about it. I mean, I know it's an instinctual reaction for most spiritual people. We don't want people to suffer. We feel empathy, we feel pity, we feel sympathy, and we want suffering to stop, yes. But if the majority of the people on earth don't want suffering to stop, what right do I have to tell them they should be different? And what right do I have to try and force them to raise their consciousness so they will no longer suffer? They have their free will. They have their right to walk whatever path they need to walk in order to see that suffering isn't the way they want to go. I can offer them something, but if I have possessive love or if I have this unbalanced empathy for them, I'm subconsciously wanting to force them to take what I offer so they can stop suffering. And you might say, but it's for their own good that they stop suffering. Well, but that's because I am looking at it from the outside and saying they shouldn't be suffering. But a larger viewpoint is they have been given free will and they have chosen to put themselves in the school of hard knocks. And the only way you learn in the school of hard knocks is that the knocks become so hard that you say, I can't do this anymore. I have to look at how I can change myself instead of trying to change other people. And I was seeing that the problem on earth is that there are people who want to change other people and force other people to change. But here I was as an avatar, I thought I was here to help the earth, but I was also subconsciously wanting to force other people to change so they wouldn't suffer. So was I part of the solution or part of the problem? And so what I came to realize is, and this has a bearing on what the person is saying, you know, can the earth become a trap for spiritual people for avatars? And yes, it can. Because I realized that I had a certain attitude, that as long as there were certain conditions on earth, like war, for example, I was always very concerned about war. As long as there was war on earth, I couldn't leave. Because I came here to help eradicate war. And until it's done, I can't leave. And that means, yes, earth has become a soul trap for me, but not because somebody is forcing me to come back into embodiment, but because I am forcing myself to come back into embodiment until I have learned the lesson I came to earth to learn. And what is that lesson? Total respect for free will. Total respect for free will. And if you have total respect for free will, you can't actually look at people who are suffering and say they shouldn't be suffering. You have to acknowledge their right to make the choices that cause them suffering, even if they don't acknowledge that it's their own choices that resulted in the suffering. You still have to acknowledge their right to continue to make that choice. You can offer them an alternative, but you cannot force them. So what I realized was that I'm not going to get out of here until I look at the attitude I had before I came and work through it in my psychology, learn the lesson I needed to learn, resolve this so that I can basically look at earth and say, there's nothing I need to do here, there's nothing that needs to happen before I can leave. In other words, what I'm saying about the question and the way the person is asking the question is, there's something in your psychology that's keeping you on earth. And until you see it and learn the lesson, you will not be able to get out of here, because you, your higher self, will force yourself to come back into embodiment until you've learned the lesson. And I don't think you have to become a sociopath to get out of here. I just think you have to raise your, because I said a sociopath has no empathy because of a lack of awareness of others, a lack of awareness of oneness, the oneness of all life. But I just think you have to come to a point where you can make this very subtle distinction where you realize all life is one because everything is created out of the one mind. And that means that all people on earth, all their original life streams, their I Am Presences, were created out of the one mind. So we are all connected, but it doesn't mean we are all one. We are individual beings with free will. And most people on earth have put themselves in the state of separation, the illusion of separation, that they are separate beings. And therefore, you can see the oneness in them, but you also acknowledge that God has given them free will. The Creator has given all beings free will. And therefore you say, you ask yourself the question, how long will I stay on earth to watch these other life streams who are in separation work out their free will? When will I decide I've had enough of being on earth, I want to move on? And when will I decide to stop seeking to change other people and instead look at myself and say, what do I have to learn? What do I have to change in myself in order to get out of here? And really what you have to do is look at your basic attitude to earth and to other people and see if you have this desire to change them, if you have a desire to change anything on earth, if you have a desire to solve any problem on earth, you're not ready to leave. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I've talked in several videos that there are some people it's in their divine plan to ascend after this lifetime, but there are many spiritual people it's not in their divine plan because they want to stay in embodiment to help Saint Germain manifest his golden age in the next 2,000 years. So I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying, if you become aware of this, and if you become aware that you want to stay on earth and help Saint Germain manifest his golden age, then you can stop resisting being here. But in order to really do this, you also have to look at what is it in my psychology that makes me feel so burdened by being here, that caused me to go into these very difficult lifetimes. And the person who's asking the question is describing how he or she had many difficult lifetimes, being killed and tortured. And I think many spiritual people have had that. So you just have to say, there is something in my psychology that I haven't resolved that causes me to repeat these patterns. And what is it? Because if you can resolve it, you can either leave or you can stay here but be at peace with staying here. And that's what happened to me. I mean, I came to a point where I had looked at this. I'm not saying I fully resolved it, but I had at least looked at it enough and resolved enough that I could feel at peace with being alive on Earth. In other words, instead of this attitude that I had, I can't live with this planet, I can't live on this planet, I can now say I can live on it. It doesn't mean that I like what's going on, but I can live here because I can respect people's free will, and I can overcome this sense that there are certain things that shouldn't happen on Earth. And I can say, well, if it's necessary for the Russian people to go into this self-destructive spiral with the war in Ukraine, however low it needs to go, I just need to allow them to do this. If it's necessary for the American people to go into what I see as a self-destructive spiral with Trump, I just have to allow it to unfold and hope that they learn their lesson from it. But I can't really be attached to whether they learn their lesson or not. It's not my job to tell people, other people, how to exercise their free will. And I think, you know, when you work on this, when you try to resolve this, the essence there is free will. Because I can see in myself how I had this, because of my compassion and love and empathy, as I would have seen it, I felt the suffering was wrong. People shouldn't be suffering. And even after I realized that it was their own choices that caused them to suffer, I wanted to push them, force them to stop making those choices, to become more aware, to look at themselves and look at life. But what right do I have to do this? I mean, I have a right to be here. I have a right to express myself. I have the right to write books or make YouTube videos that offer people an alternative to suffering. But I don't have a right to force them. And when I really recognized that, I could also be at peace with being here, even though it forces me to observe the consequences of people's unaware choices. And just say, let the chips fall where they may. I know it sounds not very empathetic, but really on a planet with free will where so many people are in duality and separation, what else can you say? And so I'm, you know, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing I don't think I've fully resolved this enigma of free will, but I can at least see I've resolved it a lot more than I had just a few years ago, and therefore I feel more at peace with being here than I did back then. So I hope this can help other avatars deal with this, because for an avatar, this is really the central topic we are here to deal with, free will, the enigma of free will. And what it really means that an individual being has an individual free will that is really free, unrestricted.